and it's getting worse. People, I think we're seeing it go that way. We've talked about it, and this episode's not meant to kind of go down that route, but we're seeing it get worse. People are more and more chained to their desk, and like I was talking to Suzanne about it the other day in a certain context, and I forget exactly what it was, but I brought up and I think I may have mentioned it to you, may have mentioned on the podcast, like the first company I was working for out of college. At this point, I was probably 23, 24 or so, and they started handing out Blackberries. So this is like the first or second gen Blackberry. They're starting to hand out Blackberries to everybody in the office, and I'm like, oh, that'd be fun. And at this point, like I'm working for a company of like 50, 60 people, right? And at this point, I had been working there since I was 20. So at this point, like I was like assistant manager for the implementation team and stuff like that at this point. And I'm like, oh, it'd be cool to have see it as a toy. And my boss he pulls me into his office. He's like, don't say that. He's like, don't say that. Do not express interest in it.
You don't want that.
I don't want it. You don't want it. This thing is a tether to the office.
Yeah.
And if the president of the company gets word of that, he'll get you one. And what he doesn't tell you, though, is he expects you to reply to emails at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't think about it that way. I just thought it was a new cool toy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I remember a similar conversation. Although I love the phone that I ended up getting. I resisted like my team, the first job I had out of college, that was the conversation. Like, we're all getting cell phones. I'm like, I don't want a cell phone. And they're like, yeah, it's the coolest ever. And they all got phones, and then they were on call all the time. Eventually I broke down and I got one. I can't remember the model. It was blue. It was a blue Nokia. And I loved that phone, and I had it for, I may still have it to this day. I remember like just getting ridiculed for it. I remember, I think I was at a Omniture. It was not Summit, but it was some sort of activity associated around Summit in Salt Lake. I don't know. I think the year was like 2007 or 8. And I have my little Nokia, and everyone else. We were in this like classroom type setting where we were all sitting at like these long kind of tables, and everyone pulled out their iPhones or their smartphones and set it down on the table. And I pulled out my Nokia and set it down on the table, and it was really. And I remember it was really quiet in the room, and literally like I watched everyone grab their phones. I probably put it on silent, put it on the table, and they had their smartphones. And I was sitting next to Hila, and she'd put her smartphone down on the table, and I pulled out my little Nokia and I set it down on the table next to her. And I think she laughed, and the room was like totally quiet. I'm like, I love the simplicity of that phone.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like when my phone broke back in the fall, my son decided to toss it onto the kitchen floor. He got a hold of it and then tossed it. And like, it wasn't even the screen cracked, like the LCD died. You just saw like the column of lit up pixels on the one side. And then that was it. I was actually debating getting a dumb phone. I really was. Like, I mean, I was on the fence on what to do.
Yeah.
And I ended up just getting like the entry level iPhone, just because there's some apps I do need for work.
Yeah.
But I'm like, yeah, like I was actually really thinking about getting like a really basic phone to make phone calls and text people, and that was it.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds nice. I'm not gonna lie. And I'm wondering, can you run two phones?
It does.
Like, can you run two phones where you can have it ring on both phones, or can you only have one active phone?
I mean, it probably depends upon your provider, and there's probably a level of forwarding. Maybe you may need two lines and then one forwards to the other.
It just sounds so nice to have it, but then I think about it and I'm like, my phone is my key for so many different things, and like my remote control, and yeah. So
blessing. I didn't do it.
Yeah.
But I am thinking about getting a new iPad right now. Where we kind of kicked this off, and I didn't hit the record button yet. Thinking about getting a new iPad though, so I can step away from the desk at times and just sit and just try, go somewhere else for, to try to spark the creativity.
Yeah.
Instead of sitting there with the laptop, just sitting there with something where I can jot down notes and organize them. But it's not necessarily a computer in front of me.
Yeah. I've been having similar thoughts because I don't have right now, and it's actually been nice. I don't have a laptop.
Yeah, you got the Mac Mini.
I've got the Mac Mini, and it's been really nice because I got to be in the office to work. I can't drag it around with me, but I do miss that flexibility, and hopefully soon we can start traveling a bit, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll need to stay connected. And so I've been debating, like, do I get like a lightweight laptop, or do I get like a beefy tablet? Like, what do I end up getting? So yeah, I'll be
Mm-hmm.
interested to see what you get and what you think about it.
Yeah, I'm debating it right now. What to do.
Yeah.
Um, but speaking of what to do, let's talk about what to talk about today. So this is the first time we've done this. So a couple days ago, you put the message out on LinkedIn. I thought it'd be interesting to see what questions listeners have.
Mm-hmm.
So it's our first time trying this. So you put it out there that you and I were going to jump in the podcast studio today. What kind of questions do you have that you would like to see us discuss? And we got a few of them, which was really
Yeah,
nice.
and I think
We got a couple good ones.
yeah, I think we could riff on those two for easily and easily an hour.
Yeah.
What we need to figure out how to get more kind of visibility. I was a little saddened by the lack of responsiveness. So maybe I need to do a better job of that. Maybe if I wasn't taking a Twitter hiatus, I would have got more interaction on Twitter. We'll see. But the questions that we did get I think are really not simple, like one minute answer questions. They're
Oh yeah,
questions that you can really dive into. So I'm happy to kind of riff on those.
yeah. Which one do you want to start with?
Oh, it doesn't matter. Let's see. I had them pulled up. Let's start with Cleves.
Okay.
You want to read it out, or you want me to read it out?
Actually, I don't. I forgot to bring it up before we started recording.
Okay.
So if you've got it up, yeah.
So Cleve, who is director of implementation over at Marriott, threw this out. Said the challenge of explaining to execs how analytics implementation is never done. It's an ongoing, always evolving project, which requires dedicated and constant resources above and beyond that, which is needed to just add new marketing tags or the occasional new variable EVAR event. And then he commented, fortunately for him, he's in a situation where his executive team really understands this, but he's worked with and seen so many who don't. I think he's probably the exception to the rule.
Yes.
I would say, at least from what we see, is that most don't see it that way. Most see it as we pay Sapient, $500,000 to come deploy our analytics implementation, and then it's done. And it's not done. And I should dig up, because I think it was fairly well received. I did a presentation at one of ObservePoint's virtual events 3 or 4 years ago on the importance of maintenance and taking care of an implementation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think is a topic that was well received, especially within the implementation crowd, because we all see it and we all know it, yet rarely is there budget, is there monetary budget, is there a time-based budget where those things can be taken care of from a pure maintenance perspective. But above and beyond that, looking at it as a living, breathing thing is often not seen by executives. And I think part of the challenge is it's not how it's sold, right? You don't want to sell that you have to maintain these things, because then you start to question, well, wow, man, how many people am I going to have to
Yeah.
maintain this? And how much budget am I going to have to put aside to maintain this? So rarely is that a conversation that comes up in the sales process. And so unless you have someone that's part of that sales team on the buyer side that really understands it, it doesn't come up. And then it only comes up later when you hand it off to your team and they're like, well, wait a minute, this isn't one of those one and done things. What are you talking about? I mean, the sales exec over at XYZ Analytics Corp said it was like, we just slap a tag on our page and we're done. But it's rarely the case. So because we see that, Cleve as being the exception, where his management team understands that it's never done. It's always evolving. What advice would you have? You're kind of down in the weeds with a lot of complex implementations, some new, some very, very old. How do you have that discussion with companies? And I think it's twofold. How do you help them understand the need to prioritize the fact that it needs to be constantly changing. It's not something you just set and forget. It needs to be constantly updated as your site and business matures. But then there's also just the fact that there's just general maintenance required. So as things age, let's talk about Adobe or Google Analytics. We may not think that there's been a lot of innovation over the past few years, but if you go back and look at the code base versions, there's been massive innovation. And so, if you don't keep up with the changes, you're losing functionality, you're losing ability to track. And not only that, being able to respond to things like ITP and different browser regulations. So there's always something. So I'm interested in your take with the companies you worked with. What kind of strategy do you put in place? How do you help sell that message to the executive team that this is an ongoing thing?
Mm-hmm. So he's got a great question, and I actually think there's another side to it, which is not the situation he is in. It's if we look at the two difficult positions you can get into is either the implementation is seen as one and done, so it quickly ages, or the implementation itself is ill defined, so the project just lingers. Like there's never an endpoint of initial implementation is done. Now we're going to start planning either future phases, or we're going to start making sure that what we built is accurate and is adopted. Then we start looking at future things. So both of those are not good situations to be in, and neither are what Cleve is saying, like the situation he's in with his leadership understanding what it takes to implement and then maintain that implementation. And as you were talking, I was thinking about like implementation itself is not well defined. It's both a verb and a noun in a way. We're implementing it and then we refer to the implementation itself. So I think the advice I give is looking to actually define how implementation is used as a word, because then I think that provides clarity. There's the act of implementing it, which is the initial project to deploy it. But then after that, it's the implementation itself, the noun, which is the foundation of your analytics data collection and potentially data collection for other tools as well. So that's where we start at, is at defining what are we actually doing. We're spinning up, in this case, coming into say a fresh client. We're spinning up a project to build the initial, to initially implement the base requirements for the analytics platform. And then from there, we work on actually adopting it and then moving on to further enhancing it. So as we go through adoption, we come to find like people have more complex questions to ask. So do we need to further enhance it or not? Then coming into an organization where an implementation is in place, it's understanding like, did they not define well like what the initial project was then as compared to say post project, and then what does the ongoing what do the ongoing steps look like?
What do you think is the best way to sell the value of that into executives? Because I think the onus is on the analytics team to do that. I think it's probably an unfair expectation just to sit back and say, well, whoever's approving my budget knows that this is important, so I'm just going to get the budget. Obviously, we see that doesn't happen 9 times out of 10. What types of conversations should an analytics manager, a director of implementation, what should they be having with their higher ups as part of the conversation of why this is important and why they need time, budget, funding to maintain the implementation?
Mm-hmm. Because the site is not static. That's the first thing, and that's the most obvious thing to go after. Is the site is not static. Your customer needs are not static. What you're going to be doing to the site is not static. So in that case, your data collection and the data distribution to your various tools, and if we're focusing specifically on analytics, those needs are not going to be static. You're going to need to have analytics, and this is where you go right up against, you go with the most obvious use case, the most obvious argument, to go right up against that argument of, oh, you slap this batch of code up on the site and you're good to go, you're done, right? Because you already called that out, like that's the easy sales pitch. Put this line of code up, our tool is implemented, and you're collecting data. If you want data that is tailored, if you do not want data that is tailored to your site, tailored to how your customers use your site, tailored to how you want the customers and how you're driving the customers to engage with the site, then that is fine. If you want an analytics, if you want to be able to perform analysis to understand how customers are using the site and are your tactics to push the customers to perform certain actions, pushing your customers to not just, if you're an e-commerce site, not just check out as a guest, but create an account, build a wish list, those kinds of things. What people are searching for and whatnot. If you want to be able to understand how customers are interacting, what signals they're providing to you based on how your site functions, then the implementation itself cannot be static. It
Yeah.
needs to flow with the product development team.
Yeah, I think that's an ideal place to start, because I think there are some very tangible stories that you can tell around the impact of that, and I don't even think they need to be what ifs. I'm guessing that you can pull out of your own experience examples of why not doing this has broken in the past, and you can go to your leadership team and say, with a couple different sides of that coin, hey, remember when the CEO wanted to know about that new feature that we launched and we couldn't because we're not doing updates to the implementation, and so we have just basic tracking, but we couldn't answer his questions. That sucked, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a product of us not investing in this as a living thing that needs to be constantly evolving and changing. Or on the flip side of that, remember when we had that investor call and you wanted all this data about what our consumers were doing on our site, but we couldn't give it to you because our tracking was broken, because we've had 5 site releases since we did our implementation and we haven't touched it since then, and now all the tracking's broken. That sucks. That's a product of us not investing in keeping our implementation solid and seeing it as a living thing that needs to constantly evolve as our site evolves. So it's interesting to me because I'm guaranteeing that if we have implementers listening to this episode, they're nodding their head right now, because
Yep.
every single one of us has been in that position where we've been told, quote unquote, we don't have the budget or the time to really be investing in maintenance. We have too much other stuff to do. And then on the exact same flip of it, being told, wait a minute, why don't we have this data that we need for this very important meeting? Well, because our tracking's broken, because we don't have time to invest in it. The answer to that.
Yeah. And like I said from the start, like, this is the most obvious argument. And in some cases, it wins over leadership. Sometimes you have to, like you said, give examples or call them out when they happen, of when the organization has tripped and fallen because they weren't listening or weren't paying attention to the implementation as the site changed. So this is the easiest argument, and because of that, though, it's not going to win everybody over, because I've made this argument and organizations have still plowed forward, because a lot of times the typical rebuke is, well, the reason we're investing in those site features is because we're expecting them to have direct revenue impact. Analytics does not have a direct revenue impact, so the cost is just not justifiable. The cost in having people maintain it, whether you need developer updates to make sure the data is available for your analytics platform, having someone on your analytics team to manage it, we can't justify it, so they just plow forward. Now, again, there's ways to come back at that argument, but you mentioned implementers listening. There's also those that are saying, yep, I've also heard that rebuke too when I've tried to make this argument.
Yeah. How much of this do you think is a problem or a challenge because a lot of implementers are Richard rather than Tommy Boy? Do you know the scene I'm thinking of in
I
Tommy
haven't
Boy?
watched it in ages.
So there's a scene where Richard and Tommy are at at one of their prospects trying to sell brake pads, and Richard's going on and on about all these technical nuances and details, and the guy's like, look, son, I have no idea what you're talking about. And Tommy Boy jumps in and is like, let me talk straight with you and let me give it to you in a level you can understand. And the guy's like, that's what I needed to hear. I'm gonna have to see if I can dig up the clip.
Yeah, you have to dig that up.
How much of it do you think is a problem of communication? Because a lot of implementers, maybe not a lot, a good percentage though, are siloed in that technical world, and that's what they speak, and they're either unable or unwilling to adjust their speech patterns and approach based on who they're talking to. And I've seen this at massive billion-dollar companies where you have an implementer talking to a VP of marketing or a CMO, talking about like, well, this is why this doesn't work because this technical component and this data layer, and then with the page load time. You're guilty, or
I still make this mistake to this day. Like, there are times where I catch myself too late as the words are coming out, and I'm like, no, I shouldn't have said that. I just killed it. I've done that. Yes, I think that is a fair portion of this.
yeah,
Because analytics implementers are passionate. They, they love what they do. They enjoy building and designing this, and because of that, they're in the weeds.
yeah,
And I think they get too in the weeds with trying to make this argument to senior management, and because and the reason why I know I still trip myself up doing this at times, I think I've gotten better in recent years, but I still do from time to time trip up, is you feel like you're oversimplifying it too much.
yeah,
And it's, by trying to simplify it, you do it too much, which, either takes away value or doesn't fully explain it. Because, I guess, and the common thing that trips me up is when someone says, can we do this? Well, the answer is yes, we can. I jump 3 steps ahead,
yeah,
but we have to do X, Y, and Z, which then makes it kills, again, the conversation, saying, yes, we can do that. And then, there's some other details we need to get into later, but yes, we can do that.
yeah. And this is kind of getting off topic a little bit, but I do think it's an important conversation, and I do think it plays into it, in that if your implementer is of that mindset and is the one fighting for budget and prioritization, I can see why that conversation probably isn't going anywhere. So as an implementer, that is either a skill you need to invest in having, or a conversation with your management team. Say, look, we need someone in this role that can bridge the gap between the business and implementation, so that we're properly articulating what it is that we need, we do, the impact. And I'm laughing even saying this in my head. I'm thinking about Office Space. Like, so what do you do here? You take the spec from the engineer and give it to the, like, why can't they just hand it directly? It's like, look, I got people skills, damn it. And we all laugh about it, but
It's true.
It's true, and it's necessary. And I think back to a couple scenarios. One, my first job out of college, I was the engineer, and I was never invited to the meetings. And I'm like, why are we having to communicate with the business analysts who then get to go sit in on all these top level strategy meetings? They're just pretty boys. We're the one that has the answers. And it didn't hit me until later. It's like, because we don't know how to talk in those meetings, and we would have completely sabotaged what our team was trying to do. It's not that we didn't have the intelligence or the smarts, or we knew it was working, but we didn't know how to translate that conversation to the level that it needed to be had at. And, fast forward many years, and I still hadn't learned that lesson because I had developed those skills. And I think I may have mentioned this on a previous episode, but I was working with our internal statisticians to build some models. And I really was excited with their work. So I invited them to a monthly meeting that I led, with the CEO, the CMO, and the CTO. And I brought in the statisticians. They gave their presentation, and at the end, they left and went back to work. And the CEO pulled me aside. He's like, "Never bring them in here again." complete waste of our time. It's not that they are not brilliant and smart, but they lack the ability to translate the message to a level that we can understand and then take action on. That's why you're here. You can have that conversation for us. So, it is critically important, and I do think it's not all of it. I mean, part of the struggle with maintaining or paying for maintenance is just the overall struggle that these analytics organizations are just woefully underfunded as it is.
Hmm.
But part of it is, and I've used the analogy is that part of it is that most analytics organizations are still at the little card table that they put next to the big formal table at Thanksgiving, where they put the kids in the overflow. That's where we're at.
Hmm.
And we have to change a lot of things to get off of that table to help solve some of these challenges.
Agreed.
Any more thoughts on that? We can talk about Nil's question next.
Yeah, I mean, anything to kind of wrap that up. Yeah, I think to your point, analytics is still at the kids' table. It's seen as secondary in many organizations, especially when you have an organization that is, um, driven by IT. Um, and it's nothing malicious on their side. It's just when you're working with an IT team in an organization driven by IT, it's they need something that is easy to maintain, something that works uh, is done quickly. So they just see analytics as extra. This is data. Like we need to worry about the function behind it, and not necessarily measuring it. We need to worry about the now, not actually being able to measure it going forward.
Yeah,
So it's one of those things. It's the different types of organizations, and I think this honestly, I think one way to wrap this up is to help make this argument. It comes back to what we've been talking about since the start of the year, which is the concept of sustainable analytics. You've really started, pushing for this topic, and I think one of the reasons why some organizations are hesitant to do there is because you also have implementers that go in and want to implement everything. It's this massive thing to get it off the ground instead of focusing on what are the core things we need to do to start showing value to the business and then slowly enhancing them from there instead of trying to build everything from right out of the gate.
yeah, yeah. Patience is important.
I mean, I say implementers, but I mean, I've also worked with business owners and clients where I've had to try to bring them back to say, no, we can't implement everything, or like trying to do all of this right out of the gate. It's potentially going to be half-ass. Like trying to test all of this right at launch is going to be difficult. So is it all going to be working? It's going to be hard to tell. We may not know right away. Instead of focusing on the most important things, and I'm thinking of a client that we helped them launch a new site like 3.5 years ago. They wanted, it's our primary stakeholder wanted everything right at launch, and it was trying to reel him back in and be like, no, like we should actually just slow down, implement what we need to implement, get that out the door, make sure it's working, and then we move on
Yeah,
to additional things.
yeah.
He also oversold analytics to the organization, so
It
that
happens.
yeah. So yeah, let's move on to Neil's question.
Okay. So this is a question from Neil. He's an independent analytics consultant who's been around for quite a while. His question was, have you ever had a client engagement where once you looked at the implementation, the realization is that the person who did it did not know what they were doing? How did you present this to leadership? Lately, my clients, the tags in GTM had to be rebuilt, and I had to teach them my method. So, for sure, that has happened. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it absolutely has happened, and I mean, I think there's a couple parts I want to go into, a couple different things to unpack with this, because this does also tie into what we've talked about before. Like, why does analytics never seem to get past a certain stage? Analytics as an industry, and it's not what Neil is talking about, but it's definitely worth addressing with this conversation. That being when people move, they come in and just demolish what was there, get something half built, and then move on, and then someone comes in and demolishes it. That's not what he is talking about, but I do want to address it. So we'll come back to that in a second. So To answer Neil's question, yes, absolutely. We have seen it. And when I read this question, I thought of a project that you and I worked on 4 years ago. And, in tag managers, I've seen two different methodologies, where it's like every tag and every possible version of that tag has its own rule, which that is a nightmare to maintain. And also just, it's not an optimized tag manager. But then this client went the complete opposite way, where like they boiled everything, Adobe Analytics, Adobe Target, a bunch of marketing tags, down to 3 roles. And you could tell it was built by a developer, and all of the logic was built in custom code. So any kind of issue, any kind of change to the site, you had to go in and understand how the developer wrote it, and how to change it in there. So that was when I remember us going in there and saying, like, no, this is actually not the way to do this. Like, this one rule should be 10 different rules. Not saying, it could even be 30, but don't go that far. But this should be 10 different rules, so it becomes just easier to maintain. So yes, definitely have seen that. And it's, when you have those conversations, you don't always want to, that's the immediate thing to go to, because then the thing that you potentially ignite in that stakeholder is great. I paid them. You're telling me it doesn't work. Now I need to pay you to not just rebuild it, but demolish it and rebuild it or retrofit it. I'm not spending any more money on this. I'm done. And now that's the extreme. But like, when I have that conversation, I don't take it lightly. You need to have a very strong argument as to why, with like concrete examples of where the way it's done is impacting the business.
Yeah, it's such a really valuable question. It's one that many of us face and will continue to face. We face it a lot from a consulting perspective because we're in so many different implementations. But even practitioners, as you move jobs, you see it, and how you respond to it is critically important. I think early on, I really struggled with this because I didn't want to be seen as like nitpicking. I didn't want to be seen as negative. I didn't want to be seen as like egotistical. It's like, oh, I could do it better than them. And I surely didn't want to be seen as, just creating FUD to sell more services. And so I often shied away from it and kind of erred on the side of maybe giving too much credit for a good implementation that wasn't. And I think at least once I've been severely bitten by that, where not being transparent in what was actually happening ended up costing us. Number one, it was a bad implementation, yet we sold it. And it's like, oh no, your analytics implementer did a fantastic job. And then every time we tried to do something, we said, well, we can't do it because this is bad. We can't do it because this is broken. Like, well, what are you talking about? You told us this implementation was solid. And ultimately, I think we ended up losing trust because, we told them it was good. We told them their implementer was good when in the end, it really wasn't. So, I think that's something that you have to balance, in that you definitely don't want to attack individuals. You definitely don't want to come at it as my way is always better than everyone else's. But I also think there needs to be a level of transparency where if you're being brought in as an expert and you're not willing to have those conversations about what's working, what isn't, it puts you in a really difficult spot to own maybe a bad implementation that was never yours to begin with.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. Now I can hear you again. I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden my AirPods caught out, so I missed a part of that. If you just give me like what questions you have back for me, because it looked like you had something back to me.
No question. Just kind of a comment in that from my perspective, it's a very delicate balance of having to be truthful and honest about I'm coming at this from my expertise and experience, and this is what I see, but not being seen as just someone that's being overly negative or someone that's coming in as a, well, my way is the best way, no questions asked. It's a delicate balance. And I was saying, and I don't know
Mhm.
if it cut out there or not, but I was saying I erred on the side of, you know, not nitpicking, not calling out where there were problems, and it
And
has
you got
cost
bit,
me.
right?
It got bit. So
Yeah.
I've definitely become more comfortable in being transparent, because it's needed, and I think everybody ultimately wins in that scenario. But I am very cautious in my words and how I choose to present that. But I'm much less in a place where I would kind of gloss over and help maybe save a previous implementer.
Mhm.
But another thing to add, and I'm going to let you respond before I go into it, because there is another lens that we need to look at this under.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if that's where I'm thinking of taking the conversation too, because you're absolutely right. It's something you need to be careful about. You don't want to immediately jump to it, because where I started this question from is something you and I have tried to talk about and tackle, and obviously we can't be the it's one thing to talk about it, but it's still something within the industry is people coming in, and if it doesn't meet like exactly the way they would do it, tearing it down and rebuilding. So you're constantly in this state of rebuild.
Yeah. It to that kind of to that point. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason why I think that happens is, well, probably twofold. One, there is a bit of an ego at play where it's like, well, this is the way I do it and it's always the best way. And we've seen that. We've
Mm-hmm.
seen that in companies where, they'll hire someone, they're like, well, this is what I did at my old company. I'm like, well, yeah, but you worked in travel and tourism and this is e-commerce. So yeah, there's some lessons to learn, but you can't just replicate what you did at a hotel on an e-commerce site.
Yeah.
So I think part of it is that ego play where it's like, well, my way is the best way. But I think that the bigger part of it, and this is kind of where I was going with it, is that it's incredibly complicated. It's incredibly difficult. And I'm not talking about putting code on a page difficult, and even the challenges we have with like tagging a single page application or mobile apps. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about having to work within a very, very complex business ecosystem. That is the complicated part. And it's one of the things that I've always had in the back of my mind. In fact, I tell companies straight up when they ask me, I often get asked, what do you think about our implementation? What do you think this looks like? Did the guy that did this implementation know what he was doing? And I always caveat it with, I'm going to give you my perspective. I'm not going to hold any punches, but I also appreciate the fact that I'm coming in from a completely uninformed perspective as to the challenges that your technology, your business have at play here. And that's one of the things that I don't think we think about a lot. It's easy to come in and say, man, this implementer was an idiot. They didn't know what they were doing. I always put an asterisk on it and say, I don't know. I don't know the pressures they were under. I don't know how little bandwidth they had. I don't know they were being asked to do a million other things. I don't know that they were necessarily working in a toxic environment and trying to. We don't know. Yeah, and the one thing we do know from working with hundreds of businesses over the years is they're all unique and they are all incredibly complex to navigate. And so we do have to give a little bit of a nod to say, yeah, in a perfect scenario, in a sterile lab, this implementation's not good. I would give it an F. What we don't know is that we didn't develop this in a sterile environment, a lab. We developed this in the real world that's messy. The real world is always messy. And so we have to take that into consideration when we're evaluating any implementation. And
Yes.
I think a lot of the time, new implementers or analytics managers that are hired, don't have not had that experience to be able to make that decision. And so it ends up in a lot of times the scenario you described. Well, this implementation is crap, so I'm going to rip it down and rebuild it the right way, because they're coming at it as, I can build this perfect. again, they're coming at it from a perspective of not understanding all of the challenges that their predecessor had and just how incredibly difficult it was to do that in a very messy environment. For sure, they probably can learn some things and make changes and bring their experience. But I think they're making a massive mistake by not taking into consideration the fact that their predecessor had to work in a very messy environment that they're not evaluating. And so, not saying that ripping it down and restarting isn't an answer sometimes, it absolutely is, but it's not the answer all the time. And it's made that decision is made far too often because there's a desire of the new implementer, the new analytics manager, to leave their mark and do it their way. And what ends up happening, they replicate a lot of the stuff they said was crap in the beginning because they didn't address the challenges in the messy business that their predecessor had to go through.
And if anything, they put themselves in an even more difficult position because they've promised, well, if I did it and I did it my way without the context that you're talking about, we would be in a better position. We would be here instead of here. And then when they get in there and they find those things that you're talking about, well, then, they're backed into a corner and have to explain, well, okay, I didn't understand this and I didn't understand that, and it's hard to get to this data.
For sure, for sure. So, I mean, my two things to recap of this would be truthful and honest. Don't necessarily go into attack, but if there are problems, address the problems. Talk to it as these are the challenges we have. I've looked at our implementation. And here are 10 critical things that are happening, and here's the impact it's having on the business or our ability to understand our customers. I think that's a very healthy approach. The toxic, not so healthy approach is to come into it and say, no, this is a completely crappy implementation. Whoever did this didn't know what they were doing. It's a completely unfair conclusion for us to draw. Unless we truly know, again, who it was, the pressures they were under, the messiness that they had to deal with, it's completely unfair for us to come to that conclusion, and it offers very little value to us or the company. And so, again, my recommendation would be truthful, be honest, but shine a light on the issues and the impacts and how we can solve them, and stay away from putting an evaluation that this person obviously didn't know what they were doing, because it's just too far to go, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Those were our two questions. I think they were good questions. I have this dream, and I don't know if it will ever happen, but I would love to, like, one day do a live podcast.
It's on my list for this year.
Right, like throw it up on one of the streaming platforms, and see if we can make it go. Because I think it would be really, really fun to be able to do something like that, where we do this live and have these questions come in. Because I think it kind of keeps us thinking. It keeps us away from that kind of being too scripted. And I would love to just have the ability to interact with folks in the community in kind of a live session. So my fear is just we won't have enough people interested in joining to do something like that. But man,
you got to start somewhere. I think if we put
it
out
so
there,
fun.
And, you know what, maybe, this was good. I was great taking questions. So maybe what we do is we try to do a live one a month, and we put it out there, on this day, 2 weeks ahead of time, put it out there. Like, we're actually going to do this one live.
Yeah.
We're going to do it live.
I'll write it. We'll do it live.
Yeah.
Still a great clip. Like, what, 20 years later, 25 years later, maybe 30 years. That's a gold clip.
Yeah. No, I don't think it's that long.
Really?
But
I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah, like maybe we do it once a month. Okay. Yeah, maybe we do a live recording once a month, and we got to start from somewhere. We got to start somewhere, and we're not going to get a ton of people right away, but if we do it on the regular, then that's how you start to build momentum.
Mm-hmm. So I guess we should do
All right,
it.
we're gonna do it. We're
We're
gonna do
gonna
it.
do it. Let's see. What's the platform that I downloaded? What's the one that the
Uh,
gamers use?
oh, I forget. I downloaded it
Twitch?
too and tried
I think it's Twitch.
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 Okay, yeah, Twitch is one of them. There's another one Hila sent. This one can do live streaming. So what we would do is we would just use this platform, and just hook it up to like YouTube and a couple of the other platforms, and then I got a panel off here to the side where I can see live comments coming in.
So I don't know when the video came out, but Bill O'Reilly left Inside Edition in 1995.
Was I thought it was from his Fox News show, right?
No, no, it's
No, it
from
goes back
Inside
to Inside
Edition.
Edition.
Yeah,
Oh, okay, so it is older than I thought.
yeah. The clip may not have come out for many, many years after that,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, that's a pretty that's so good. There's been so many remakes. My favorite one is Stewie from Family Guy. Have you seen him do it?
No, I haven't seen that one.
Okay, after we're done here, I'll send you the
Yeah,
clip.
yeah,
It's
send it to me after we're done.
perfect. Like Stu, it's so spot on. It's so funny.
Mhm.
All right. Well, this was fun.
This was fun. It was fun to get some questions, and yeah, I think it's great to hear other people's perspectives. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think coming out of this, we're going to start doing a live one,
Yeah, we should
and
do it.
we'll start
It'll be
sharing it
fun.
with folks, and
Yeah.
so we can start getting some comments.
Yeah, that would be cool. All right, man.
All right. Well, happy Friday,
Yes.
and we'll catch everybody later.
See ya.